walk through the looking glass and suddenly we're in David's court. We're inside the palace. And we start seeing things that we didn't see before. In my opinion, the narrator's given us little clues all the way through, but we can't really see it. All we see is what David wants us to see. Suddenly we pass through the looking glass, and suddenly we start seeing things that we haven't seen. And I can understand why we haven't seen it, because it's rather unsavory. So what I'd like to do today is just finishing up 2 Samuel, just reading a couple of chapters. Chapter 11. This is kind of an important story. And again, sorry to keep harping on this, but it seems to me what happens in chapters 11 and 12, in light of all those little stones that were thrown before, maybe at least this is the clearest moment of what I call a sixth sense moment. And that is, up to this point, we've been led down a primrose path about how wonderful David is, how peaceful he is, how gracious he is, how much God is with him, how much God loves him, how much God supports him, yada, 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 yada. Once we pass through and we get to chapter 11, and suddenly we actually see what David actually does. We actually see the way in which he works. Suddenly what it does is that it causes me to think about all those chapters that have come before, about all those clues, and reevaluate all of those statements, particularly the ones that the narrator is trying to tell us, subtly. But anyway, we'll see what we have here. Chapter 11. Maybe it'll turn out all right this time. It hasn't in previous years, but we'll see. Maybe the story's changed. Chapter 11, it hasn't changed. 11. So, in the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle. Well, of course they go out to battle in the spring of the year because the winter is the rainy season, and you can't go anywhere in the rainy season because all your army type of stuff gets bogged down in the road. So you wait until it stops raining, dries out a little bit in the spring, then you go out to war. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent. See that little verb, sent? Keep your eye on that little verb. That's going to be a very important verb. I can't state this, but I suspect that if you take the entirety of chapter 11 and you break it down into individual words and you take out all those verbs, the verb sent is going to be more than any other verb. If you ask me what chapter 11 is about, it's not about adultery. It's not about murder. It's about sending. David sent. Spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent. David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him, and they ravaged the Ammonites. They besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. And so it happened late one afternoon when David got up from his, it says couch here, but it's actually the word bed. So late one afternoon when David finally got out of bed, he was walking around on the roof of the king's house, and he saw from the roof a woman bathing. And the woman was very beautiful. And David sent someone to inquire about the woman. And again, I'm sorry to keep doing this, but you see how it says, it was reported? It doesn't say that in Hebrew. What it says is, he said. And I assume that the he said isn't the messenger. The he said is David himself, and that's important. So David sent someone to inquire about the woman, and he said, that's Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, and Uriah is one of his best warriors. So Hittite. So right there, David already knows everything that's necessary to know about who this woman is bathing. Primarily, she's somebody's wife. And so David sent messengers to get her. And she came to him, and he lay with her. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. Oh, the narrator comes in here and gives you a little piece of it. This is another Sixth Sense moment, because the narrator comes in here and tells you a little something that was happening before, after they've had sex. Now he tells you something about that was happening before. Oh yeah, remember when she was bathing? She wasn't really bathing. It wasn't just a bath. What she was doing was performing her mikvah. She was purifying herself from her uncleanness, right? Because according to Leviticus, right, when a woman finishes her menstrual cycle, you wait a certain number of days, and then she does this ritual thing with water, which brings her from the state of temporary uncleanness to cleanness, because that's how you get from temporary uncleanness to cleanness, is water, right? So she's doing her what's called mikvah, right? So she's showing through a ritual that her menstrual cycle is finished. So far, so good? Which means that if Uriah had had sex with her before, that did not end in pregnancy. And so if, I know it won't happen because, of course, but if she happens to have sex now, I know it's crazy, but if she happens to get pregnant, it obviously can't be Uriah's. Make sense? But you notice the narrator doesn't tell us that until after the deed is done. Brilliant. So, now, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, she was purifying herself from her period. And then she returned to her house, and the woman conceived. And you notice what happens here. She sent and told David, I'm pregnant. So Uriah sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. Oh, this is good, right? So Uriah is going to be coming from the front lines back to David. I wonder why. Why does David want to meet with Uriah? I know why he wants to meet with Uriah, because I've seen him all the way since he's a little boy being anointed and that whole Goliath thing. I know the reason why. Again, everybody messes up. And so what he wants to do, I'm sure, is bring Uriah back and confess everything. Right? He's a man after God's own heart, right? Right? He's God's chosen one, right? He's the one that God loves and supports, right? David always does what's right, right? I'm sure that's the reason why. I'm absolutely convinced. Send me Uriah the Hittite. Oh my God, David is so good. And so Uriah, so Joab sent Uriah to David. And when Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab and the people fared and how the war was going. Well, that's kind of interesting, because he doesn't confess anything. And in fact, he just brought his best warrior from the front lines in order to find out information, when there's a perfectly good way you find out information from the front lines, and that is by sending a messenger. You don't send warriors to give information, because they're fighting. It's kind of interesting. I don't know why he's asking about all that stuff. David said to Uriah, why don't you go down to your house and wash your feet? Exactly. Because feet is a euphemism in Hebrew for that part of a man's body that sticks out. Exactly. So why don't you go down to your house and wash your feet? So Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a little champagne, chocolates, maybe some oysters. A little present from the king. That's so sweet. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the king's house with all the servants of his lord. And he didn't go down to his house. That's interesting. I mean, if I had been on battle, I had been in my wife's, I would. It's interesting that he doesn't go down to his house. I wonder why he doesn't go down to his house. You just notice all you're doing is just seeing what's happening. You're not giving. I just wonder what's going on in Uriah's mind. And when they told David, Uriah didn't go down to his house. Which is also kind of interesting, right? Who are these people that are telling David that Uriah did not go down to his house? Well, they are obviously people that know that David wants Uriah to go down to his house. And I wonder why David wants Uriah to go down to his house and wash his feet. I sort of wonder if the people that are reporting back to David also know the reason why David, again, just remember, this whole thing has just been sending. And when it's sending, it's not sending telegrams, it's sending people. And the funny thing about people is that they see, hear, and know certain things. I just wonder how many people in the city of Jerusalem actually know what's going on. It's kind of like a 19th century English novel of the manor house. And in fact, the servants know everything. There really is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. Uriah didn't go down to his house. And so David said to Uriah, oh, you've just come from a journey. Why didn't you go down to your house? And then Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah, they're living in booths. My lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. And then should I go down to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? You see, it seems as though Uriah knows exactly why David wants him to go down to his house. David didn't mention this before. He gave a little euphemism, but he didn't mention this before. And so it seems as though Uriah knows exactly why David wants Uriah to go down to his house. But what business is that of David about having sex with his wife? Oh, unless. As you live and as your soul lives, I'm not going to do that. In other words, go down to my house to eat and drink and have sex. Then David said to Uriah, well, remain here also, and tomorrow I'll send you back. And so Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. And on the next day, David invited him to eat and to drink in his presence, and actually made him drunk. And in the evening, he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his lord. But he didn't go down to his house. And in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. Uriah is an Israelite? Is he? No, he's a Hittite, right? It's interesting, right, that David is writing this letter, almost certainly in Hebrew. He's giving it to Joab, who's not an Israelite, he's a Hittite. He reads Hittite. For me, at least, I just think it's an amazing turn of events, is that Uriah himself is holding the letter, but he can't read it. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah, and in the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him so that he can be struck down and die. And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were going to be valiant warriors on the other side. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell, and Uriah the Hittite was killed as well. And Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting, and he instructed the messenger. You see, here's the messenger that comes to the fore. And he instructed the messenger, when you finish telling the king all the news about the fighting, then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, why didn't you go so near the city to fight? Why didn't you know that they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Abimelech the son of Jerubbaal? Didn't a woman throw an upper millstone on him and from the wall? And so, again, you don't fight near the wall in the city, right? Because things, again, boiling oil and, all these things from medieval times, right? You don't go near the wall. That's dangerous. Why did you go so near the wall? Then you say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. It's very clear what the whole shebang was really about. And so the messenger went, came and told David all that Joab had sent him to tell, and the messenger said to David, The men gained an advantage over us. They came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. And then the archer shot at your servants from the wall, and some of your servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Notice he doesn't even wait for him to get angry or anything like this, because, come on. You know, I know, Joab knows, everybody knows what the whole thing is about, and that is killing Uriah. So, anyway, Uriah's dead. Thank you very much. And David said to the messenger, this is what would appear on the news. This is what we would have heard before chapter 9. Oh, this is what you should say to Joab. Don't let this matter trouble you, because the sword devours now one and now another. You can never tell about these things. So press your attack of the city and overthrow it, and encourage him. Because that's what David does. He encourages people. Right? And when the wife of Uriah heard that her husband was dead, she made lamentation for him. And what that means is that performs funerary rites for him. It has nothing to do with emotions. She performs funerary rites for him. She puts on black and a veil and all that stuff. And when the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife. And she bore him a son, who was 3 months premature. Because obviously it's David's, right? I'm sorry, it's Uriah's, isn't it? No, it's David's. But the pregnancy is like 6 months, even though the kid is like 8 pounds. He thinks he's hiding, but he's not hiding. Everybody knows. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. And the Lord sent Nathan to David. And he came to him and he said, it's a funny thing, I was just hearing about this the other day on the news. There were 2 guys in a certain city, one was rich and one was poor. And the rich man had very many flocks and herds. The poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb which he had bought. And he brought it up and it grew up with him and his children. And it used to eat his meager fare and drink from his cup and lie on his chest. It was just like a daughter to him. And now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he didn't want to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the wayfarer who had come to him. And so he took the poor man's lamb and prepared that for the guest who had come to him. David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. And he said to Nathan, well, you know, what the law says is that if you steal something, you need to return it and pay like 6 times over. Right? Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Right? Not meaning that you've got to, but you certainly wouldn't want to, I don't know, do something stupid, like because somebody steals a lamb, you want to like execute someone, because that would be stupid. Oh, that's not what he says. As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. No, it doesn't. He doesn't deserve to die. There's a thing called justice. You give back when you steal. That's justice, not die. He should restore the lamb 4-fold because he did this thing and because he had no pity. Not 6-fold, 4-fold. Because he had no pity. And then Nathan said to David, you're the man. Oops. You're the man, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. I anointed you king of Israel. I rescued you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house. I gave you your master's wives. I gave you the house of Israel. I gave you the house of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would have added much more. So why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword, and you've taken his wife to be your wife, and you've killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Remember, a few classes back I talked about justice, God's judgment. Actions have consequences. It's not like you do something bad and God like means